Hey, hey, baby. Hey, fairy goddaughter. Hey, y'all. Hey, how you doing? Aw, thank you, Courtney. Yo, let me tell you something about this lipstick. This lipstick is like $5. I got this lipstick at our local beauty supply store. It's one of these like New York Kiss brand situation or whatever. It's like $5. And I get so much love for this little lippy. But now it also matches my like mermaid undercut under layer situation. So, I like purples. Hey everybody. We have a special guest joining us soon, but I just wanted to, there they are. Hey, hold on, Latishia, hold on. I'm going to do a quick intro for people who are new to our IG Live conversations. And also just to remind people about who we are. Hey, y'all, it's Omi. I'm the curator and, me too, curator and creator of the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. We are a multimedia platform that is engaged in narrative and culture shift work to normalize menopause by centering these stories of Black women, women identified, and gender expansive people. We do that unapologetically and consistently with fervor and zeal. It is our ethos to also be consistently engaged in intergenerational conversations. This is our jam. This is what we do. One of the things that we are committed to is making sure that the conversation about menopause is open and diverse and inclusive. So that way people can find their story inside of the stories offered, but also people who are coming behind us generationally will feel like there's a nice, wide, illuminated path. So they don't have to kind of like reach around in the dark and try to figure out what's going on and how I'm feeling and what does this mean and any of those things. Like we're really doing this work. So we have a podcast. Our most recent episode is still up. It is an intergenerational conversation that I had with Amber J. Phillips and Sonya Renee Taylor. We had a great time, y'all. We had a little bit too much fun. So you should check out that episode. Our next and final episode of the podcast for season 4 will be coming out next week. And it's a conversation between myself and my producer, Mariah, to talk about our relationship and working intergenerationally. And I'm just super excited about this. Thank you, beloved. I really appreciate you saying that. And we will be doing a recap of season 4. So if you didn't get a chance to check out season 4, we'll do a recap and you can check that out. Our next zine will be coming out in November. Messages from the Menopausal Multiverse. We will be exploring 4 folkloric tales of women in aging. 1 tale from Senegal, 1 tale from Kenya, 1 tale from Russia, and 1 tale from Mesoamerica. And we'll explore from their first person voice that folkloric tale and why we problematize women as we get older. Yeah, I can't wait either. Y'all are going to love it. Y'all are going to love it. It's so good. We're working with 2 fantastic people. Ariel Smith is in graduate school for folklore at UNC Chapel Hill, and she's partnering with me to help me with these folkloric tales. And then Gemini, who is a local amazing Black queer femme artist here in Durham, North Carolina, is doing all of the artwork. Y'all ain't ready for this artwork. I'm telling you right now, you're not ready for it. But anyway, we launched these IG Live conversations back in March during Women's History Month. They're called Millennial Mondays, Not Your Mama's Menopause, and What's Up, Doc. And they have been sponsored by our local NPR station, WUNC, North Carolina Public Radio, who has just been a tremendous supporter of the Black Girls Guide since day one, like literally since we started in 2019. They have given us space to talk about what we're doing. We've been on several shows. We are now partnering with them to do co-hosting on a podcast hosted by Anita Rao called Embodied. Like, they have just been a tremendous partner, and I really want to appreciate them. So yes, I'm so glad you clicked the notification. I was just telling somebody how to do that. So Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time because I want to have this conversation with our special guest. Tonight is our October Millennial Monday, and so I'm going to bring our guest on. Let's see here if I can make this happen. There we are. Hi! Hi, honey. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. You look fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not saying it in a way like I'm surprised, but you look very glowy. It's just kind of like this kind of came onto the screen.
Oh, thank you. Shout out to the ring light.
Look, ring light, and shout out to having real freckles. Have you noticed, like on TikTok and all these other little filters where everybody's got freckles? Like, y'all, Latishia's freckles are real.
Yes, they are real. They are hard earned and real.
That's right. She was born with them, y'all. So I just want to be clear. It's like, is that a filter? Like, sis, what filter is that? It's called my mama and my daddy.
Yes, literally.
Listen, so I want to back up, y'all.
Okay.
At the beginning of the year, I posted this thing. I was like, who do y'all want to hear from? And what do y'all want to talk about? And when I tell y'all, Latishia had a whole list, a wish list. She was like, I would like for you to talk about this. And I feel like you should talk to this person. And wait a minute, while I'm at it, you can talk to me too. I was like, okay. So it was this beautiful, enthusiastic, hell yeah response. And I was like, you want to have a conversation with me? And you were like, yes, I would. And so we were scheduled to have a conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about your journey as well. Back in April, but things did not work out for very important reasons. But I promised that we would not be foiled. So here we are 6 months later.
You did. You had that dedication. It was like, it's okay. Rest. We'll be back.
Rest. Because I'm that chick. I'm like, I know what it means to give your body exactly what your body is asking for. And you also went through a pretty significant like health process that you needed to honor. And so I'm really glad that you're here with us today. So I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So you can share your name, your pronouns, where you are joining us from. And then I would love, let's see, here's a question I've been asking people about fall. What are you looking forward to during this fall season? And what's one thing from summer that you want to hold on to throughout the rest of the year?
Got you. Okay. I love this. So hey y'all, my name is Latishia James. My pronouns are she and they. I am also known as Reverend Pleasure. Hey.
Hey.
And I'll talk a little bit more about Reverend Pleasure and the work she does in the world. But I am coming to you from Muskogee Creek Land, also known as Atlanta, Georgia. And fall, so my birthday is in fall. So fall is like my favorite season. It's my birthday, but also I don't wait until January for my new year. So because my birthday is in the fall, and fall is all about like letting things go, purging and the cleansing. And I'm a Scorpio, y'all, so I like to go deep. I'm like, oh, we're talking about death.
Like,
yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Talk about dead things and letting them go. So that is me in fall. I love it. I'm like, oh yeah, let's get into it, and like excavating all the things that that are dormant. I would say the thing I'm keeping with me from summer is exploration. I got to do a lot of exploration this summer. I'm in a season of transition in my life, and so I got to do a lot of exploration just around like me and who I am and what's happening, and things I like and don't like, and rediscovery. And so I'm gonna keep that same energy like on the season.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I was talking to some folk. I was doing a training a couple of weeks ago, and we did this really beautiful deep dive into the transition from summer to fall and what that brings up. And I was talking about my memories of being a kid and how summer was just packed full of cousins. You know, we would, if school let out on June 5th, my parents were in the car on June 7th. And we split our time. We were living in Maryland at that time. We would split our time between Brooklyn, New York, and New Bern, where I was born, also where we came back to after my parents got divorced. And we would be just surrounded by music and food and just being outside and feeling free. And there was no fear. It was just such a beautiful time. It's the 70s. I can remember the smells. I remember my cousins like playing Stevie Wonder songs in the Key of Life, in the brownstone, and that they had a black cherry incense, and I was always like, can I take one of these incense with me? And they'd be like, yes. And then at the end of the summer, we would just be undone, like hysterical crying, like, we don't want to go. Can we please stay? And my parents, of course, would say, no,
No.
no. Get yourself together. Gather yourself and get in the car because we're leaving. And then when we get home, the friends that we had left behind were waiting for us.
Yeah.
Right? And they would run up to the car and can we go outside and play after we put our stuff up? And they was like, sure, you can play till the lights come on. And I think for me, now that I'm in my 50s, like I miss some of that freedom that summer would offer you, to play and explore and be adventurous and be around people who are your first best friends. And so I said, you know what, Omi, you can actually like be more intentional about reclaiming that. I still have cousins that I'm super close with. I'm close with my little sister. So like there are ways that we can remember and honor the sweetness of that energy while also moving into fall, which fall feels like to me that time, right, when you're just hunkering down. And then when you move into the winter solstice is when you're burying into the ground, the cold ground.
Mm-hmm.
Want to see manifest, because as soon as that night you bury it, the next day the ground starts warming up. So it's just like, right, it's just this really beautiful renewal piece or whatever. But you and I met when I was working at Sister Song at the Let's Talk About Sex conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Let's Talk About Sex is Sister Song's biannual conference where they bring together people from all over the country to talk about all things related to sex and pleasure, sex positivity, body positivity. And they also kind of create these workshop spaces for folk to do deep dives in different topics. And so I would really like for you, before we start talking about your personal journey, and where you've been and what you feel comfortable sharing. But I would really love for you to talk a little bit about how you became the Reverend Pleasure. And, because you have to say it like that, Reverend Pleasure.
Pleasure, yes. I'm start writing it like that.
Yeah. And put in parentheses, Omi said I should say it like this. And I'm also very curious about this sacral spirituality. And I think a lot of people who are going to check out this conversation will also be interested in understanding like how we heal our sacral spaces for people who are aging, who either have uteruses or womb space, and the difference between the two. So I'm going to sip on my tea while you kind of break this down for us.
Yes, thank you for this. And yes, that Let's Talk About Sex conference was a time in New Orleans. Yes. So I was raised Pentecostal Christian.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are listening who may not fully understand what that means, Pentecostal is an evangelical denomination. It is a black, I mean, very specific, black Pentecostal.
Black. So black. Black.
Oh, and I was specifically raised in a Black Caribbean Pentecostal church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there were a lot of, intersections of things happening in my upbringing, particularly as it related to how I viewed my body, God, religiosity and things. And unfortunately inherited a lot of shame in that space when it came to my body. And a lot of messaging that told me that my body wasn't mine, that it belonged to God, it belonged to my father, one day it would belong to this mythical husband. I say mythical, y'all, because I'm very gay. Um, right.
And it was like, it's not gonna. And they were like, yes. And you're like, okay.
Right. So one day it would belong to this mythical cishet man. It would belong to my children. It belonged to everybody but me. And I just remember being like, well, this is interesting. And so as I got older, as I came into my queerness, as I started exploring my sexuality and different things, I remember just like shame would just follow me everywhere, particularly as a survivor of sexual trauma, because I literally remember feeling like, oh my God, I am not a virgin anymore. And all of these things that like got ingrained in me. I was like, oh, God is going to be upset with me. I've disappointed my church. I've disappointed my family, right? Because again, my body didn't belong to me. So I was the least of my concerns after those assaults, right? Which is mind blowing. I was the least, I was not concerned about.
Wish that wasn't the case for so many people, but it feels like that's a pretty predominant narrative where it's like something awful and egregious and violent happened to me, and I feel guilty and shame about it for it happening to me because I was told that my body I don't have any body sovereignty. I don't, none of this right here is mine anyway. So if something happens, I'm also held responsible when something happens to it.
Exactly. And so you mentioned Sonya Renee Taylor earlier, and Sonya, it talks a lot about body terrorism. And for me, the majority of my body terrorism started in the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it started with this narrative that my body didn't belong to me, and then it went on to other things around the size of my body and the shape of my body, and having to like try to hide my body under certain clothes. And y'all can't see my full body, but I've had the same body since I was like 10 years old. So do you imagine, at that age, and people are like, oh, you got to be careful, you don't want to tempt men in the church. And it's like, I am a child. What are you talking about? Tempting men in the church. Doesn't make any sense. So, long story short, that foundation and that upbringing, and carried me through. And really, as I got older and I started to try to unlearn some of this, the thing that I recognized was that all of those teachings, those wrong teachings, by the way, I just want to name that.
Right.
None of that is theologically sound, FYI. So none of those teachings were allowing me the ownership and allowing me the ability to really embrace pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my journey of reclamation, part of my journey, how I came into reproductive justice and all the things, was through a faith perspective, because I was tired of this narrative that, especially in the Black church, that, oh, Black church folks, that we are prude and that we don't know things, and that, we just aren't accessing the fullness of who we are and our humanity and our wholeness, and also seeing the ways that white supremacy and patriarchy constantly colluded to Black women's sexuality and to rob us of our sexuality, frankly. And so I became Reverend Pleasure when I was in seminary. And I went to seminary, went to get my master's of divinity, because I was like, okay, we finna get all this together and really figure out, what the Bible says and doesn't say, what these theologies are. I was introduced to womanist theology, queer theology.
Can you say a little bit about womanist theology? Because I think that's going to be a nice kind of segue into the sacral work, healing work that you've done and helping people understand what that is. I'm gonna make sure my thing is up so they can hear us. So yes, please say more about womanist theology and queer theology, because some folk might be like, oh, okay.
Most definitely. Thank you. So womanism comes out of work that was coined and really nurtured by Alice Walker. Um, and there's a very long definition of womanism that I encourage you to please look up. But the short, right, of it, at the end, the fourth definition, it says, womanism is to feminism as purple is to lavender.
Right.
And the idea, right, womanism, and I would argue as well that womanism was coming about also at a time that Black feminists were problematizing feminism, right,
Mm-hmm.
and and so you have both things happening kind of around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And feminism really was a deepening, right, and a recognition that for Black women and femmes, that the feminist of du jour was not helping us. It was
Right.
not needed. It did not encompass. It was not intersectional. It did not at all take into account the wholeness and fullness of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so womanist theology built on that, on the foundation of womanism, and is really looking at a theology for me that is grounded in wholeness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That theology that is grounded in wholeness, and that is really talking about what does it mean to flourish emotionally, mentally. What does it mean to flourish as Black folks, but particularly as Black women and femmes? What does it mean to have the wholeness of your being recognized and to not feel like you have to silo parts of yourself in order to gain recognition as a whole human being?
Mm-hmm.
You know, my favorite part of the definition from Alice Walker, this is a variation, says, loves spirit, loves the folk, loves dance, loves food, loves the moon and roundness and pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like the fullness of it, um, for me has always been what drew me to it.
Mm-hmm.
Feminist theology also for me, it's not a theology, in my opinion, that argues against anything. And I often find that a lot of times, like religiously or spiritually, that it feels like we're like using religion to argue against a
Right.
thing. Womanism is advocating for a thing,
Right.
right?
That's right.
Exactly. And that has grounded me since I was introduced to it. When I was in seminary, and it very much so has been the foundation for my sacral spirituality work, and that healing and that reclamation, right? Because she talks about pleasure and she talks about time for yourself. Yes, time, yes, the collective, but also individual care, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't see that a lot
Mm-hmm.
in religious spaces
Mm-hmm.
for women and for Black women and women of color. You don't see that a lot,
Yeah.
right? You see this constant sacrificing, this constant putting others before yourself.
Right.
Again, your body doesn't belong to you, so everybody else is benefiting from your time and your labor and your energy, but you. But here it is in this definition. She's like, yes, the collective and communal, and we're focused, and also is a separatist.
And you too, right? Like you get to be a part of that. I said to someone the other day, I said, I am not fighting for a liberation that I can't exist inside of. Why would I? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But that's not how I used to think. You know, when I first started doing social justice work, it was like, I'm likely doing work that I will never be the beneficiary of. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And now I feel like I'm in a both andness of, there is work that I'm doing that I likely will not be the beneficiary of. And there's work that I'm doing that I will be the beneficiary of. It's the both andness of it that I get to actually experience my own liberation, my own liberatory practices in the time frame that I'm alive, and that I deserve that. I deserve that care. I deserve that freedom, that healing, all of those things. There's something that you said that I want to dive into as it relates to womb space. So much of what we talk about with menopause, right, is focused in things. Of course, it's focused in on your cycle. So it's focused in on your uterus. And then it's focused in on all of the awful, terrible symptoms that people experience because they're estrogen and progesterone levels have diminished. And so they're experiencing all of this harm, or not harm, but experiencing just a very dynamic, challenging time that can be challenging physically and can be challenging emotionally. And I don't think that people understand that the sacredness of your womb is not because you could potentially carry a child. So I would like for you to talk about the sacred sanctity of the womb space and the sacral space, whether you have a uterus or you don't have a uterus, and why that healing that sacral area is such a gift at any age, but in particular, I think as you get older, to come back and reclaim that sacral area that may have experienced an injury, some harm as a young person. And you might think, well, this is just how I am, this is just how I move, and not seeing the connection between that and the way you view abundance, the way you experience joy, the way you experience creativity or artistry or pleasure that doesn't have anything to do with sexuality. So I'm gonna let you do your thing, because you are the Reverend Pleasure. I'm just here in the church pews to say amen and hallelujah and ashe. So,
but you got it though, yes. So so the best way I know how to talk about this is something that my friends and I have often talked about. And it's what I've observed in the intergenerational workplace between Black women and femmes. And one of the saddest things that I ever saw in a workplace was literally watching older Black women who had been in an environment, for a while and could help younger Black women who were into the same space to be like, okay, well, let me show you the ropes and do the things. Instead, be very
mean, Latishia, mean. I know you don't want to say it, but I'm gonna say it for you. Be mean as shit, and you wouldn't necessarily understand it. You were like, "What is it about?"
Like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
And what I had to finally come to realize was that there was jealousy, there was envy happening. Trauma that was manifesting itself as jealousy and envy because younger Black women in the workplace were not putting up with things that they had put up with, were trying to do things differently in a way. And it actually was what started to spark my sacral spirituality work, because we were more vocal, we were more outspoken. And for those who are not entirely familiar with sacral chakra science, as my mentor Gina Breedlove says, it is not of my lineage, but I borrow it. Right? So in sacral chakra science, if one of your chakras is out of alignment, right, the whole system is out of alignment. However, there are like connections between particular chakras, and two chakras that are intimately linked are your throat chakra and your sacral chakra.
So here, and then down right here, belly button,
and right below your belly button, right? And so to tell you a little bit about what they both rule, your throat chakra is ruling truth. It's ruling communication. And it's not just communication, it's honest communication. It's vulnerable communication. It's transparent communication, right? Your sacral chakra, yes, it's ruling reproduction and those things and your sexual organs, but it's also ruling creativity, right? It's ruling creation, period. All forms of creation. And think about, if my throat chakra is blocked, if I'm not able to speak my truth, if I'm not able to be vulnerable, if I'm not able to ask for what I need, what I want, to claim my desires, how am I going to be able to create?
You won't. It'll be stifled. It'll be stunted.
And I started to recognize, particularly in older Black women who had been churched and had particular religious upbringing, they hadn't spoken up for themselves for so many years in these environments. And so younger Black women and girls and femmes taking up space, saying the things on their mind, cussing people out if they need to, not holding anything in, right? It took them aback. But also it meant that they saw that them being more free here meant they could be more free here.
Sure.
Right? They were embracing their joy, embracing their pleasure, all of these things. And I saw that for myself too. I did a lot of work on my throat chakra in 2020, all of 2020, which was great. Pandemic. It was a great time to like, let's get it done. What's led a lot of transitions in my life. It's okay. But the more I opened that, I became more open. And I was always a person who felt like sacrally, I was pretty aligned and grounded because I love sex. I love pleasure. I love all these things, right? But it's like when I understood what the sacral chakra was really about, that it's about creation, I realized, oh, I was experiencing writer's block. I hadn't danced in a while. I was experiencing these things, and it was like, oh, because this is also not at the same time. And once you start making the connections, it's hard to unsee them. But for me, the sacral spirituality work is really about that reclamation piece for those of us who have been indoctrinated by religions that are patriarchal in nature. So evangelical Christianity, anything fundamentalist, right, that are patriarchal in nature, that has taught women to be small, to be quiet, not speak up for themselves. Usually also has a correlation with those same women being modest and meek and not owning their sexuality and not owning their creation or their creativity, right? Everything in this little box. And so healing that to break out of the box, regardless of whether or not whether or not you are birthing children.
Right.
So particularly for folks who have uteruses, who are older, who are not birthing children anymore, but you can birth so many other things.
Let me say something real quick to you right now about this. When I said mean earlier, the reason why I said that, I said to my cousin, who's one of my best friends, I now understand at 55, while there were older sisters in my life when I was a younger person who smelled so good, were so fly, and were so mean. And I understand that meanness was a mask for depression. That meanness was a mask. That meanness was a mask for being invisibilized. That meanness was a mask for being told, be quiet, be small. You don't own any of this. None of it. And so when we made a decision with the Black Girls Guide to focus, focus on first person narrative, there was something that was very clear to me. It's like, if this becomes full-throated, if this becomes open and vulnerable and honest and earnest and authentic, what's possible, right? What is possible head to toe with who you are and the fullest sense of your personhood? Like, I get chills even thinking about it. Like, we are like 3.5 years into creating this wide open space. And when I tell you, I still get DMs from folk who say, I was shamed. I was shamed about my body. And now my body is older. And I don't know how to wrap my mind around claiming my body in this older form, because in this younger form, it became performative or it became masked.
Yes. And you couldn't act. Because that's the other thing too, is that there's no, then you get blocked from your own body. You are living in this beautiful vessel that you can't access emotionally, psychologically, right? People say, oh, I don't feel certain things. And that's trauma when you can't actually feel into your own body. And so that's a big part of my work, is reconnect to their bodies, to unlearn a lot of that narrative around shame, right? For me, shame is the ultimate sin because it disconnects you from yourself, from your community, and your divinity.
Yeah. I see that.
So any narrative that is promoting shame, that to me is sinful.
I think that I agree with you. And we are living in a time now that I think is really confusing and powerful at the same time. You know, it's confusing, not even confusing, it's challenging because we see so much like vitriol and violent hate speech. And then conversely, you were seeing people who are like, I'm not here for any of that nonsense. And I love seeing that where people are like, what are you saying? Absolutely, I do not agree with you. And don't say that. And don't talk to this person that way. And it's really powerful to see this happening more and more. And the more that we kind of get into this conversation about your body's going to change from the moment you took your first breath to the moment you take your last, your body is changing.
Yes. And there's something else I want to say about the connection, I feel like, between this religious indoctrination and the inability for us to be in the fullness of our body and also be with all the changes, right? So, as you know, I had a myomectomy earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
They removed 12 fibroids from my body.
Mm-hmm.
But also, didn't know there were so many fibroids in my body.
Wow.
Suffered for years.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible periods. Terrible. I really thought that light and 3-day periods were reserved for the people that you see in the Playtex commercials.
You're like, this is not for me. You're like, I don't know who has
I like you skipping and hopping and jumping. But now, I'm like, oh my God, I'm one of them. I'm one of them bitches in the commercial. But I remember, even though I've done all this work around unlearning, I remember when my gynecologist first diagnosed me with fibroids, just having this feeling of like, oh, what did I do? Like,
that was your thought. What did I do to make this happen?
To make this happen? And when you think about religious doctrine that is shame-based and that is body terrorist-based,
Mm-hmm.
it literally puts you in that place of, oh, well, let me make sure that I pray hard enough and I'm a good girl and I do these things so that my body is pleasing to these other entities that are right. And so when you're thinking about your body going through changes and not performing in particular ways, that indoctrination comes back so fast. It's like a whiplash. You're like, I don't believe this anymore. But here it comes immediately. Oh, I must be doing something wrong. Like I think about my friends who had trouble breastfeeding. Oh, it's my fault, right? I'm doing something wrong. I disappointed God. I did something. I didn't do something right. And that's why my body is not acting. Because we get fed this script. If you pray and you do these things and you're a good girl and you keep your legs closed and da 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 da, then everything will just magically align.
You won't have any problems ever.
None. No problems at all.
And we know that's not true.
Not true. It's all bullshit.
Period.
All bullshit.
Yeah.
And so this idea that there's something spiritually amiss, right? That we get spiritually bypassed into disconnecting from our own bodies.
Sure.
And not caring enough about our bodies or not knowing things about our bodies or thinking it's gross to look at our own vulvas and get our bodies intimately. I've heard entirely too many stories about people who went to the doctor a little too late, right? And got a cancer diagnosis way late stage because they weren't doing their own self-examinations.
Because they didn't want to touch their own body. Outside of washing their body and putting on clothes, any touching, examining, exploring of their bodies have been demonized and pathologized for them. So they're like, of course, no, I've never looked at my vulva. No, I've never looked at anything this. I don't even know what it looks like. You like, that's your body. Whose body?
Because you have whole narratives around how disgusting and shameful masturbation is. So now whole generations of people who have never even examined themselves, not even for pleasure, just to know their own body. And so for me, when we're talking about aging and we're talking about body exploration and reclamation, this sacral spirituality work is so important because I think it does impact a particular age group of and femmes, and Black non-binary people, and Black trans masc folks as well, who were socialized at a particular time. It does. I remember I facilitated a session around reclaiming your sacral sanctity for a group of students at Spelman. And there were some of my contemporaries in the room who had invited me, and I preached against the Proverbs 31 woman. And I just remember...
Say more about Proverbs 31 woman.
So, Proverbs 31 woman. So, the Proverbs 31 woman, again, is a text that Black women of a particular age know very well because it was forced on us as like the blueprint of womanhood, motherhood, wifehood, all the things, right, that you are supposed to be is wrapped up in this passage in the Old Testament of the Bible. And it really has taken, I would say at this point, because I would say it's mostly impacted boomers, Gen X, and millennials.
Yep. Yeah.
And it has really formed how it is we've like approached dating, approach how we view ourselves, how we operate in the world, right? I still love the color purple. And I don't know if it's because of the Proverbs 31 woman or just because I love the color purple.
I think it's because of the color purple. Yeah.
Right? It's my favorite color. But there's a line in the passage that talks about her dealing in purple cloth. It's the whole thing. And so I was talking about it during my facilitation, and I was just so happy that there were a few students in the room who didn't know it, hadn't been impacted by it. And I was like, oh, yes, the tide is turning. I think we're doing enough work that a new generation will not have this text, forced on them as the thing that they need to live up to. In their lifetime, because it's unrealistic, and furthermore too, it's written by a man in ancient Hebrew, and he's also writing it about his mother, right? So you have all these layers of things that's happening.
We don't get to unpack by any stretch of the imagination when we're listening to these things. We don't know these things, and then when we get introduced to these things, then it makes you think, well, wait a minute, let me think about this differently. Like maybe this translation isn't even accurate in terms of like what I'm trying to apply to how I'm supposed to show up in the world, or my understanding of what the world is, which is so limited in that way. But I definitely feel that as a Gen Xer, like I'm grateful to be in relationship with folk who are boomers and older than me, and also with millennials and Gen Zs, because I feel like Gen Xers, we're like the middle children, we're like the Marsha Brady's, not Marsha, Jan Brady. We're like Jan Brady. We're the proverbial middle child of the generation. We were the first generation of latchkey kids. We came home, we let ourselves in the house, we took off our school clothes, put on our play clothes, got our homework done by ourselves, often started dinner, went outside, played, and got back in the house. Like we were just really kind of self-regulating ourselves, and so much of our emotional shape was not always attended to. So we know how to get shit done, but do we always know how to take care or tend to ourselves emotionally in a full way? No. And so there's a lot of unlearning that I feel like I've been doing as a Gen Xer. I know so many other folk who are Gen Xers who feel like they've been unlearning. And there's some things I hold on to. Like I do love being a Black Southern person and the respect I have for my elders. That's important to me. And I know that if an elder says something that is like incredibly problematic, the way that I would approach that elder is different than the way I would approach that elder in my 20s or my 30s. My 20s or my 30s, I may not say anything. I might just be like, yeah. But now in my 50s, I might say, that's really interesting. Can I tell you a story? And then I just, instead of saying to this person who may be 20, 30 years my senior, you're wrong and that's messed up and you're this and you're that, and use language that they wouldn't even understand to try to body check them, I would basically offer my personal experience as perspective or a story as perspective and leave it at that and be like, so anyway, you want some tea? And just like keep it pressing, But I do find that the unlearning piece feels like such a potent piece of like work for us. And I'm curious, Latishia, like, why do you think it's so important for us to have these intergenerational conversations? Like, for you, like, why does this feel important for you?
Yeah, it feels important for me because I feel like I be missing stuff sometimes.
I feel like it too. So I need to talk to you because I feel like, well, do they say that anymore? Or let me ask your opinion on something.
No, but I remember one time, so after I turned 30, I started dealing with insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
And after like maybe the third, I don't know, a few months, I started to notice a pattern. So I looked it up. And the internet told me that ovulation-induced insomnia is a thing.
It's a thing.
So I immediately got on Facebook and I said, uterus having people, are any of y'all experiencing this? And the majority of people who responded were older than me. And I was like, why have y'all not been talking about this? What? Wait, why are you just letting us discover these things on our own? Like, what do you mean? Yeah, welcome.
When I found my first gray pubic hair, I called my eldest sister and I was like, ma'am, you couldn't tell me that the same way my hair on top of my head was going to go gray, that it was going to go gray. And she was like, but now you know. I said,
Oh, no.
No, anybody who's on here right now who is going gray, you should anticipate that your eyebrows, your eyelashes, under your arms, and your pubic area will also go gray. I just want to go ahead and let you know that.
Thank you for the heads up. And this is conversations are important to me because I'm like, I'll listen. I know sometimes I'll just be like, well, y'all not going to listen to us anyway. I will listen. Please. What is coming so that I know what to expect. Because when I tell you that caught me all the way off guard, because I was like, what is going on? So every month, just ovulating and insomnia. Okay, thank you.
The amazing thing about our hormones, your hormones bathe every part of your body. So when we're talking about hormones, people always zoom right on into the uterus. They're like, let's just stay right here in this area. You're like, your hormones bathe your brain, your vision, your teeth, your hair, your skin, the skin all over your entire body. So when people talk about vaginal dryness or vaginal atrophy or pain when they're having sex, penetrative sex, it's because it's skin.
If you have tightness here, you probably, if it's dry, it's probably dry there too.
It's probably dry all over. And so part of what we get to remind ourselves of, and I'm so grateful for this conversation, is to look at yourself as an entire unit of systems.
Yes.
Not to compartmentalize and be like, I'm just going to focus on this thing here. Like the amazingness of this divinity right here, the navigational system that's embedded in here is phenomenal. And it is always going to give you information. Whether you can make sense of it or not is not always guaranteed. Sometimes you need help because it can be illegible. So,
which is why conversations are important, right? To be say, oh, I'm going through this. Did this happen to you? Do you know what this is? Do you know anybody that went through this? Right? But also, I think these conversations are important because they're deeply healing. They've been deeply healing for me. So I'm living in an intergenerational house right now. My aunt, my cousin, and then my god baby, who's 10. And my aunt is in her 60s, and my cousin is 24, and I'm 34. And when I think about it, and we're like in these conversations, and we're like wrestling with things, right? And I'm like, this is the thing that is going to help us. For me, it's a big liberation and help us get free. Because if I get to talk to you about why is it that, this theology and how it impacted me, and that I don't believe this anymore, and here's why. And I'm talking to my aunt, she's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And then my cousin never even has to deal with it.
Which is so amazing, right? So it is the sweet spot. The sweet spot of, I never thought about it that way. You are giving me something to reconsider, and someone who will never have to fight that fight.
And I love that for us.
I did too. So listen, we've got like 10 minutes left.
Okay.
You want to answer some cards?
I love your cards.
All right, well, let me go in the chat real quick so I see what people are saying. So, oh, you're welcome, Stephanie. She said, I am so glad this platform is available for me. Somebody said, thank you. Hey, Ash Ketchum. There's my baby. Hey, Ash. Emotional neglect as a feature versus a bug. Yeah. The way that we take care of ourselves and not understanding. You deserve it. Yes. Lots of love for this conversation. Say it again. Okay. Lots of interesting people are like, ooh, come on, Pentecostal. People trying to figure out like, oh, I get it. So, all right. Because you are the Reverend of Pleasure, and because we're talking about sacral healing, I am going to pull from the fire element. So y'all, you know that with the Same More deck, you've got 4 elements. You've got earth, air, water, and fire. So the fire element talks about pleasure, intimacy, creativity. So this is definitely the sacral area. And so this is the question I pulled this question for you before we got on. Check this question out. You're going to trip. Here we go. What are 3 ideas that you would share with someone who is curious about how to have more fun with their sex life with or without a partner? And the element is intimacy.
Oh, I love this so much. This is perfect. So to have more fun with or without a partner. So I would say I'm going to start without.
Okay.
As that is usually where I start with folks who are on their like sacral pleasure, sacral sanctity journey. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you cannot communicate to yourself your desires and needs, it's going to be very hard to communicate to someone else. So for fun with yourself, I would say try out different sound, like a soundscape.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're into sound healing, sound bowls, anything like that, but also you could just like have your own like playlist and use whatever playlist you're playing as a vibration and like rhythm play.
Mm-hmm.
Being on the rhythm of the music is also going to be the rhythm that you're like engaging with your body. And see how that feels for you. Like slow songs, faster songs, right? Like lots of drums, like maybe it's more strings. But I that is something that I find that can be fun for exploration, especially if you're nervous or it's not, you're new to it.
Okay.
For more fun, partnered, I like to do like fun like guessing games. So this could be a different level. So if you're comfortable with it, you could close your eyes or use a blindfold. But if you're not comfortable with that, you don't have to. But you can do things around like if someone is using an object to like touch your back, right? And you have to guess what the object is. Like it produces different sensations, and so it could be like a feather in the middle of your back, or it could be like a piece of ice right on your foot. Right, it depends. And so you're also getting to play, you're doing like sensation play, but also seeing trust and connection and intimacy as well. And then I would say a third thing, and and this I think could be done either by yourself or with another person, would be mirror play.
Mm-hmm.
So mirror play can be fun. It can be a little challenging, particularly if you are a person who's like new to looking at your body.
Mm-hmm.
Can be a little intimidating, so you might want to do it by yourself first. But I think that it can like be helpful, especially if like you're a person who's just like trying to build connection with yourself or with another person, to like do some mirror work, like
Mm-hmm.
in the mirror or like touching in the mirror. But I have found that it really can help to lower some of the discomfort after you've like gotten used to it a little bit, and it really like builds intimacy. And if else, you'll get a laugh out of it, right? Because it's
I love the mirror play. One of the things that I started doing this past year when I returned to my yoga mat was before I would get on the mat, before I put my yoga gear on, I would stand in front of the mirror naked. And, and I've shared this previously on the IG lives, and I would say, okay, well, which part of my body am I really loving today? Like, I'm just like, ooh, girl, look at these thighs, or whatever. And then there are days, honestly, Latishia, that I'm like,
not
I
feeling.
had it today, but I'm grateful for this body carrying me, and we'll return to the body tomorrow. I've actually felt like I've definitely enjoyed when I've had a lover or when I was dating someone, when we would explore each other standing in front of a full-length mirror. Like this kind of like very soft, slow, sensual kind of like, I really like your elbow, or I really like your earlobes, or I really like this part of your neck, and to be able to say that to each other as well, like, I like this. And to watch each other touch each other is really, I think it's really fun and beautiful. So, yes. You want to do one more before we go? Okay, let's see. Ah. Describe your best sexual experience you ever had in only one word, and give no further context or explanation. Just let people wonder. And I promise you, that is the question, y'all.
I love it. Okay, one word. Marathon.
Okay. My word, I was like, oh, okay. My word, game changer.
Nice.
So, isn't
Okay, what a note to end on.
that awesome? Yes. Listen, beloved, I'm so glad, one, that we got to meet physically in person before the pandemic. And so, like, that we physically have been in each other's presence before. I'm so glad that we got reconnected on the interwebs and Instagram, and that we were able to come back full circle and have this conversation. And also, you have shown us lots of love consistently. You've just been like, love it. And I really want to appreciate like all the love and enthusiasm, and just kind of like being a cheerleader for the way that we are doing this different. We're kicking off into World Menopause Month, and I know a lot of people like, why are people even talking about this? So we're talking about this because more than half the world's population will be menopausal by 2025. That's a lot of people.
A lot of people.
A lot of people, a lot of women identified, non-binary, gender expansive, trans people will be menopausal by 2025. And we, the same way you talk about living in this intergenerational house, where you get to have the conversation with someone who's older and they say, I never thought about it that way. And the fact that someone coming behind you will not have to fight to have that conversation, or to feel like they have ownership of their body. And then us all in the mix will be healing and taking care of ourselves, and having, as our friend Sonya likes to say, is more body sovereignty. And we have Gina in common. Gina is my big sis, and I adore her. And she has done so beautiful healing work for our bodies. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We love you, Gina.
We love you. So I'm going to upload this and share this. I'll tag you in it, and I will put a a quote for womanism, so people would know what womanism is, and womanist theology. And I will also put Proverbs 31. So I'll just pick.
Well, no, what we trying to unlearn, what we don't want.
What we're trying to unlearn, y'all. We are all in the process of unlearning. Latishia, listen, thank you so much for being with me today. It's so good to see you. Somebody said, so important for women to share with one another. This is awesome. Thank you so much, y'all. You all are welcome. You're welcome. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. We're so glad. And I will be having a conversation on Wednesday with B. Dixon from the Honey Pot Company. Yes, I'm excited about this conversation because I love the honey pot. So we are going to have a conversation about menopause on B Dixon's IG, and we'll share more of that. And I'll see what I can do about my YouTube channel, y'all, is a little sketch, but I'm making a commitment to be more consistent with it in 2023. So hopefully we'll have a lot more content on YouTube as well, but this will definitely be here. The full video will be on our IG live, and you can listen to B and I's conversation on Wednesday at 3:00.
I really hope, I know it's you and it's B, so I feel like it's going to happen, but I'm just going to say, I really hope there's some spirit talk about on Wednesday and
Listen,
because we didn't get to it here, but part of it too, the sacred spirituality is the Oshun of it all, and
the Oshunness of it all. And yes, but me Oshun represents. Woo! But one last thing I will say, when you talked about the seat of creativity, so for folk who are studying African traditional religion and really trying to understand better what the sacred aspects of nature, the Orisha, represent, Oshun represents that seated nature of creativity, that seat of it, whether that creativity or that reproduction is a person, or if it is art, or if it is music, or if it is healing practices or healing modalities.
As long as it's life-giving and life-affirming.
Life-giving, life-affirming, that is her dominion. And I'm grateful to be her child and to be a priest in this tradition, wearing her crown. And that this is work she sanctioned. She sanctioned this work 10 years ago. Right before I got initiated. So like every time this is coming up, it's like, no, this was sanctioned. It was sanctioned by my ancestors, and it was sanctioned by Orisha. So I'm grateful to do this work.
I love it.
I want you to have a fantastic evening.
Do love. Thank you so
much. Do a follow-up message, okay? All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.